Hello there, folks. This is Luke today at the Classical Martial Arts Research Academy. Just got brought to my attention that I haven't yet made a video defining what Hojojutsu is, or Torinawa Jitsu as we call it. Frankly surprised me because I've made like a dozen videos or so on the subject without actually defining it, which is odd. But so I'm making this video today because someone brought that to my attention, and so here it is. What is Hojojutsu? So, Hojojutsu can be read two ways, either Hojo or Torinawa. In both cases, it's the same characters, just different ways of reading the same characters. Some people associate this with different time periods, but I haven't seen a way of detailing that furigana that exemplifies it in any case. So, if we break down the characters, Hojojutsu or Torinawa Jitsu means basically the first character Ho or Tori means to capture or grab, often used in conjunction with Jujutsu. So it's the arrest or capturing, and Nawa or the Jo part of Hojojutsu literally means rope. It doesn't define what kind of rope, it just means rope, something fibrous and elongated. In Japanese, they don't differentiate by the language alone whether or not it's hemp or jute or similar such stuff. Most of the stuff behind me is jute here, except for this guy, which is hemp. And as you can see, there's different grades of it, different colors of it. So that's all different grades of jute rope. So it's basically Hojojutsu would be like the science of arresting using rope is how I like to translate it, generally speaking. A little bit heavy-winded, but whatever. Now there are subcategories of Hojojutsu. It's not just the art, practice, and science of grabbing someone and tying them up or fighting using rope. No, these all have different terms for it. So most people that are somewhat familiar with it, they picture Hojojutsu being the practice of grappling and using rope to tie up someone who's fighting back. Well, this isn't entirely accurate. In fact, that's one of several subcategories, and several subcategories associate this. We've got like Nawajutsu, for example, which is the science of rope in the first place, or rope techniques. And that is generally fighting using rope much the same way as you would a short length of chain. That's very rare to come across. You usually see that in Masaki Ryu and a couple other traditions, but that's extremely hard, very high level stuff. Then there's Hayanawa. Hayanawa is kind of like a temporary arrest with rope. It's the equivalent of handcuffs. It takes a tremendous amount of skill, and there's different sort of stages throughout history as to how this would manifest. Nowadays, you'd probably grab someone by the wrist, pin them to the ground face down, and start tying them up. That's Hayanawa, and that literally means quick rope. Haya meaning quick or something fast, and Nawa, again, as we said before, means rope. Then there's Honnawa. Honnawa is kind of the more interesting stuff. This is, well, not more interesting, but the more complicated stuff. This is, I'll show some pictures in a bit. Actually, what the heck? This is Honnawa. So it's basically what would happen after the person's been arrested, once they've already been bound with a small piece of rope. This would be what would be applied after the fact. It's less temporary and more intricate. Obviously not something you do on a battlefield or during conflict. So that'll kill off one of those major misconceptions. There's also many other variants of rope. We've got kinnawa, where you'd have rope attached to the end of a steel or wooden ring like this, and the purpose of that is to make it quicker and easier to apply the equivalent of a slip knot. A little bit more durable in a certain respect and much less nitpicky. Another one we have is the kaginawa, where you'd have a hook on the end of the rope. And this one here would be used for hooking things like the top knot, the cheek, maybe skin, and of course clothing. And so that's what that's about. There is a couple other accessories such as that, but those are the two major ones, the hook and the ring. As for the history of Hojojutsu, or at least a brief synapse of it, it's found in most major cultures and certainly traditions. Everything from the Wild West with lassos and that sort of thing to depictions in classical literature from medieval Europe with people being bound in confinement. The China, Korea, and Japan all have very similar sort of rope arresting practices or confinement practices, whereas generally they would all have some kind of basic tie that would hold the person still, but usually it's with a single length of rope. Usually it would be accompanied by armed soldiers. Basically, you're not going to struggle out of it, because if you do, you're just going to get knocked upside the head, and that'll be that. But then, out of those three traditions, it's been my personal observation, at least, that it's the Japanese that really sort of elaborated it and, advanced it. For better or worse is up to one's personal interpretation and subjectivity, but they've certainly made it rather excessive in its points of interest. And so in the early stages, you would be looking at very simple sort of rope techniques where the person's pinned down on the battlefield, bound briefly, usually quite tightly and violently, and carried off to be imprisoned, executed, so on and so forth. There's many different directions and reasons to go with that. And then it was around later in the later part of the Sengoku period, so the Warring States period of Japan. That's when you started seeing a differentiation between Hayanawa and Honnawa, and you start seeing where a shorter single length of rope that might be carried inside someone's garments and used on the fly to temporarily restrain someone slowly grew into another branch where once a person was already bound with a short length of rope, it would be replaced with a longer length of rope, certainly under the point of a spear. And so nowadays, we don't really have a whole heck of a lot of traditions. There's like Tatsumi Ryu, components of Seigo Ryu, that document I showed a second ago, and some of the traditions in the Bujinkan still have teachings on the subject, so on and so forth. But again, there's only like maybe a dozen traditions I've come across nowadays that still teach it to some extent. Takenoichi, one of the oldest jujutsu and grappling systems, that's also known for using short weapons. There is demonstrations recently or that's recorded on some of Good Karma's footage that show that. That's pretty cool. I recommend following him on Patreon for that. And yeah, so ultimately it's pretty much all but a dead tradition. If you're looking for quick and efficient rope techniques nowadays, grab the person, pin them down, tie them up in a way they can't move. It's just that simple. The more complex stuff for the Honnawa, that was generally used to be able to interpret someone's crimes or interpret their social class. You wouldn't tie the lower class in the same way you'd tie an aristocrat, as an example. And a warrior might be tied more intensively than both. That is to say, warrior's a little bit more problem-solving oriented. The lower class has a tendency of not being particularly educated in these sorts of things, and the aristocracy definitely not educated in these sorts of things, but still, even contrary to their crimes, still demand a certain level of respect. So there's all that. I briefly touched on the material of rope. Nowadays, it's not uncommon for people to practice Hojojutsu with nylon, like this. I personally prefer jute because it's really smooth and handles nicely, or of course hemp, which is, by all rights and concerns, the classical approach. It was the easiest to manufacture, even though it wasn't easy to manufacture. And Japan is definitely known for being a very rope-centric culture. Everything from spiritual traditions and ritual to daily living, it's all the same sort of thing. Now, what am I doing these days is I'm actually translating what would be considered the Encyclopedia of Japanese rope wresting techniques. It looks a little something like this. You can see it here. It says Zukai Hojojutsu, which is like the illustrations of rope wresting techniques. And this was authored by Fujita Seiko, published in oh goodness, I'd have to double check that one. Published quite some time ago. And it's basically the collection of his father. His father was a police officer. This is basically the collection of his father's documents on rope wresting techniques. And it has over 600 illustrations on these sorts of things. Such as so. So it's about 300 or 400 pages. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm a little bit focused on translating it. But 300 or 400 pages with 600 and some odd illustrations like this, along with lots of content regarding material and manufacture of the rope, the application thereof. Although it's not an instructional guide, it's a sort of category of what we call a sort of Jiten. So it's like an encyclopedia. And yeah, so I've been translating this rather intensively over the past while, and yeah, I'm hoping to have the translation made available quite soon. If this is something you'd like available in English, then by all means, check out my GoFundMe page there. People who donate are entitled to a copy of the finished product when it's done. And if you're looking to just donate because you like my face, then then I appreciate that. I've also got PayPal for that. But do please consider donating on GoFundMe, and I'll certainly be in contact if you do so. If not, by all means, send me messages either on YouTube here or on Facebook or wherever you might know me from, and I'm an open book in regards to any of the content that I work with. Alrighty, well, I hope that answers all the questions and concerns, and my monotone explanations didn't put anyone to sleep. You guys party on, and check the description for all the relevant links.